Hi, I'm Danforth Prince from Blood Moon Productions. We have a gift for Mother's Day for all of the mothers of America who have always wondered about maternal links in Hollywood, mother-daughter relationships that survive, and about the greatest mother-daughter act in the history of showbiz. In this case, it's a double biography about Carrie Fisher and her mother, Debbie Reynolds. Its title is Princess Leia and Unsinkable Tammy in Hell. It was written by Darwin Porter, with just a little bit of help from me, Danforth Prince. Everyone agrees that Debbie Reynolds was charming, effervescent, and sunny, America's sweetheart during the darkest days of the Cold War. But there was a dark side to her, too, something in vivid contrast to the winning formula that everyone in America seemed to adore. In reference to Debbie, columnist Earl Wilson said, quote, "She was hard as nails, with more balls than any 5 guys I know." Her intergalactic and very hip daughter, Carrie Fisher, was fathered by Debbie's then-husband, the 1950s pop crooner, Eddie Fisher. Carrie grew up to become a poster girl for the screwed-up children of the very famous. Gifted, gilded, and relentlessly worldly, she was, according to her doomed lover, John Belushi, the hippest chick in Hollywood. Debbie was born on April Fool's Day, 1932, in a rot-gut part of the Dust Bowl, in her case, a downtrodden, impoverished neighborhood of El Paso, Texas, during the depths of the Depression. Short, tough, scrappy in a fight, and very, very confident, she evolved quickly into a tomboy, hunting jackrabbits for the family's supper, killing and skinning rattlesnakes, and commandeering the sink in the washroom of a nearby filling station as her personal wash basin. In a traumatic memory she retained from her childhood, she described getting trapped and lacerated by the thorns of a tumbleweed as it rolled across her family's yard during a windstorm. Based on her own account, an underage Debbie first learned about sex when 2 17-year-olds invited her, when she was 6, for a ride in their jalopy and then sexually molested her in a forest a few miles outside of town. One of them paid an awful price for molesting her. In a kind of bitter justice straight from the rural pockets of the Gothic, his father tracked him down and castrated him. From the gritty depths of her gritty childhood, Debbie's Gothic American parents, each a devout member of a fundamentalist Christian church, hauled her from the Dust Bowl of Texas to the bright lights of Los Angeles. Her father found work in the rail yards there as a means of putting food on the table. In a few short years, America would be embroiled in World War II, which would change their lives and the presuppositions of Hollywood in ways that no one at the time could have imagined. Mary Frances Reynolds, as Debbie was called back then, blossomed and thrived in this strange new world of movie stars, palm trees, and orange groves. She became a film addict, played in the school band, sold Girl Scout cookies to help the war effort, and became a model of wholesome, all-American values. She entered the Miss Burbank of 1948 contest, wearing shoes that were too large and a makeshift gown. For the talent contest, she personally engaged the audience with a hilarious impersonation of the somewhat screwy blonde bombshell, Betty Hutton. Throughout the rest of her life, Debbie was forever after admired for her impersonations. The best of them mimicked the Hungarian accent and over-the-top glamour of her friend Zsa Zsa Gabor. In that contest, the judges awarded her first prize, which led to a movie contract with MGM, and over the course of many decades, one of the most durable careers in the history of Hollywood. When she was only 18, in 1952, she became the perkiest performer in shoe leather, dancing up a rainstorm in Singin' in the Rain. Despite the loud objections of Gene Kelly, her co-star, and with the personal support of Louis B. Mayer, she danced and emoted her way through what became the greatest Hollywood musical of all time. Debbie, who had never considered herself as an accomplished dancer, was rehearsed until her feet bled. In a kissing scene, Kelly, who at 38 was more than twice her age at the time, fed her first taste of a probing tongue, going, in her words, for my back molars. Through all those feel-good musicals in which she appeared during the heyday of the Eisenhower 1950s, Debbie proved resilient, a singing, dancing sensation of massive talent. She was the button-nosed boop-boop-a-doop girl, strutting her stuff and emoting with warmth an archetype of the very pretty, completely unpretentious suburban girl from next door. Debbie had found her lifetime shtick, that of a relentlessly upbeat gal with plenty of spunk, humor, and razzmatazz, and America gobbled it up. Barely out of her teens, Debbie became what she frankly admitted was up close and personal with the likes of Frank Sinatra, her co-star in The Tender Trap. There was also a romantic interlude with the dashing Lex Barker, with the studly screen Tarzan, whose muscles also found their way into the seductive boudoirs of both Lana Turner and Ava Gardner. Debbie's first love was that brunette heartthrob, Robert Wagner, one of the leading pretty boys of the 1950s. Alongside Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter, Wagner had emerged from the stables and casting couch of the notorious Henry Wilson. But Debbie soon discovered that her most formidable competition for Wagner's affection came from Barbara Stanwyck, one of the toughest dames of film noir. A new young man, James Dean, was about to enter her life. He was charismatic, intense, screwed up, handsome, vulnerable, and doomed. It appeared for a while that Debbie would be cast as his co-star in Rebel Without a Cause, that elegy to the teen angst of the 50s. Jimmy came, he saw, he conquered, she later recalled with a certain bitterness. She lost him, as well as the role she craved, the part going instead to her rival, Natalie Wood, who also managed to snare Robert Wagner as her eventual husband. I had many reasons to loathe that little cannibal, she said in reference to Natalie and her 1959 film, All the Young Cannibals, in which her co-star was, guess who, Robert Wagner. In 1955, Debbie married for the first time, a disastrous union to then-pop sensation Eddie Fisher, boy wonder, balladeer, and spokesperson for Coca-Cola. Even after their widely publicized wedding, something she described as her official deflowering, they were hailed as, or perhaps imprisoned together as, America's sweethearts. Although their union led to the birth of Carrie and her brother, Todd Fisher, their union was more traumatic and less happy than what was presented to the general public during the giddy, frothy publicity that hounded them wherever they went. The illusion of Debbie and Eddie as America's sweethearts lasted through co-starring stints in movies that included Bundle of Joy, a commercial failure whose tensions reflected the strains, domestic and on-screen, of their actual marriage. Debbie's world collapsed after Eddie deserted and then divorced her for one of the most glamorous and enchanting screen vamps, Elizabeth Taylor, who ever landed on her feet or on her back in the annals of Hollywood. Elizabeth's husband, Mike Todd, had just been killed in a plane crash, and Elizabeth, according to her friends, had lost her mind with grief. Eddie, as a two-timing bastard, and Liz, as a homewrecker and harlot versus Debbie, exploded into fodder for the tabloids. Debbie battled on as, publicly humiliated and with two young children, her romantic so-called fairy tale ended and reality set in. The situation was compared to the collapse of America's core values, victims to the decadence of Hollywood. One of the high points of Debbie's career came in 1957 with Tammy and the Bachelor, in which she was cast as a country girl from the Louisiana swamps who marries her true love, the heir to a local plantation, sweeping skeptical urbanites and more polished female rivals aside with her wholesomeness, charm, and pithy wisdom. The film's sugar-coated theme song, as performed by Debbie, went gold, playing relentlessly on jukeboxes and hamburger shacks across the country. It also typecast Debbie for the rest of her life as a virginal innocent, something even her potty mouth and frequent off-color onstage jokes could never completely eradicate. Later, Debbie lamented, quote, "I spent the rest of my life singing Tammy on stages from Vegas to Atlantic City. It became for me the kind of showbiz staple that Over the Rainbow was for Judy Garland." In her somewhat sanitized memoirs, Debbie did not actually reveal the names of her string of hot lovers, but she always dated from the A-list. One of her beaux included the handsome, studly Hugh O'Brien, TV's Wyatt Earp. The ruggedness and twinkling good humor of James Garner stole her heart, as did that of her co-star, the then-famous dancer and choreographer Gower champion. The hotel heir, Nicky Hilton, Elizabeth Taylor's first husband, introduced Debbie to the darker, more abusive side of seduction. Dana Andrews' handsome younger brother, Steve Forrest, seduced her before returning to his wife. Glenn Ford, himself in the throes of a divorce, was a frequent visitor to Debbie's bedroom, as was Tony Curtis, a co-star with whom she later feuded. Even her good friend, the very talented Liberace, in a vain attempt to mask his status as a flamboyant queen, wanted her to be his bride, with the understanding, of course, that separate lives and separate bedrooms would become a discrete part of a marriage best described as understanding. When Baudouin, king of the Belgians, visited Hollywood during a goodwill tour through the U.S., he paid a royal but romantic call on Debbie, who at the time was filming It Started with a Kiss. During the course of that heavily monitored state visit, His Majesty escaped with Debbie for an off-the-record weekend, a detour that panicked his security detail at the time. She later followed King Baudouin to Manhattan for another romantic rendezvous. I missed my chance to become Queen of Belgium and First Lady of the Congo, over which he once ruled, she lamented whimsically years later. Other romantic liaisons followed in the form of, among others, Bob Fallon, who was introduced to Debbie as part of a blind date after the death of his wife, Marie Wilson. During the course of their 8-year affair, she nicknamed him Bob Phallus, an ironic and very sexual term of endearment, duly noted by Debbie's alert teenage daughter, Carrie. Debbie delivered her most famous performance in 1964, when she was cast as the gutsy, nouveau riche heroine of The Unsinkable Molly Brown. Her performance as the social climbing wife of a lucky but socially clueless Colorado miner led to an Oscar nomination. In it, she danced up an all-American storm whose sheer athleticism almost landed her in a hospital. Debbie's final marriages to shoe retailer Harry Carl, husband number 2, and to real estate developer Richard Hamlet, husband number 3, each ended in heartbreak, betrayal, sabotage, oceans of financial embarrassments, and the ongoing image of Debbie as a survivor in the face of adversity. A gambling addict, Carl frittered away his millions and hers too. Impoverished after their divorce, she ended up for a while sleeping in her car. In court during her divorce number 3, she accused the two-timing Hamlet of elaborate conspiracies to defraud and embezzle. In her memoir, she described her suspicion that he'd plotted to murder her with the intention of collecting on the insurance policies he held on her life. Throughout the many phases of her career, Debbie mingled with most of the greats of Hollywood. They included both Clark Gable and Gary Cooper, each of whom told her they wished they were 20 years younger. She also described her interactions with Lana Turner, Betty Davis, quote, "In a catered affair, she was my mother," Katharine Hepburn, Spencer Tracy, and Lucille Ball. Judy Garland became her friend, and once, on a particularly dark and troubled night, propositioned her. Much to her credit, Debbie, with style and savvy, turned her admiration of Judy Garland, as well as her friendship with the also bisexual Joan Crawford, into enduring friendships. Although I myself turned on Warren Beatty, I don't think Carrie rejected him during her filming of his movie Shampoo, Debbie said. I think I was the only star in Hollywood that Warren didn't shtup. That guy even seduced both Madonna and Jackie Kennedy. As mother and daughter matured, Carrie Fisher, with the cinnamon bun hairdo forever associated with Princess Leia, developed a cult following so huge that Debbie began introducing herself to younger audiences as, "Hello, all of you younger fans out there. In case some of you don't know who I am, I'm Princess Leia's mother." For years, Carrie was stalked by Star Wars fanatics, many of whom became obsessed with her iconic portrayals of Princess Leia in the many installments and sequels in which she portrayed that pivotal role. Meanwhile, in between experimental and later addictive dalliances with sex and drugs and rock and roll, Carrie fought a bipolar disorder that she described as, quote, "dragging me down a stairwell to a dark gulf." Although Carrie grew up as the privileged royalty of a showbiz Beverly Hills family, she endured a life of living hell. Clinically diagnosed as a victim of bipolar disorder, her demons included drug abuse, chronic anxiety, and behavior that she herself defined as erratic and occasionally punctuated with electroshock therapies. She described men in her life who came in and out of a revolving door. In London, Carrie hung out and got high with Mick Jagger and sustained brief sexual affairs with noted, brilliantly talented bisexuals who included both Freddie Mercury and David Bowie. Back in Hollywood in my movie roles like the Blues Brothers, I enjoyed good times with both John Belushi and his Canadian friend Dan Aykroyd, she said. James Brown, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, was a detour for me. There were so many others, but who's counting? Not me, Carrie claimed. Carrie's most high-profile affairs were brief but tantalizing. In Hollywood, she shacked up with the famous Beatle, George Harrison, and in Washington, D.C., she seduced two of the U.S. Senate's most celebrated members, each a Democrat, and each duly noted by witnesses to their affairs at the time. They included Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut and Senator Teddy Kennedy of Massachusetts. Although Carrie had appeared in earlier films, international celebrity came with Star Wars in 1977, when she played Princess Leia, an elaborately coiffed intergalactic princess spearheading the Force and strong enough to oppose the villainy of Darth Vader. A love affair with the married Harrison Ford faded into a marriage to singer Paul Simon as they crossed a bridge over troubled water. Her final marriage to Brian Lord, a savvy and spectacularly hip Hollywood agent, ended when he outed himself as gay and later established a widely publicized marital union with another man. Adept as an actress, a screenwriter, and a novelist, with a knack for staying employed in an industry where many lesser talents had faded into obscurity, Carrie produced a series of autobiographical books praised for their lacerating insights into human frailty. The New York Times defined Carrie as, quote, one of the rare inhabitants of La La Land who can actually write. In contrast to her daughter, after Debbie's status as a major league movie star had gone down a few notches, she took her act on the road, sprinkling stardust across theater and dinner theater stages from Miami to Utah, from New York to London. During her early stints before live audiences, she had sometimes appeared on stage with Carrie, leaning hard on their status as mother-daughter collaborators and allies. In each of her many appearances, even until her final curtain, Debbie replicated the nostalgia of the entertainment industry's golden age, emerging as vintage Hollywood's most effective and most tireless promoter. Debbie wanted to play herself in Carrie's mother-daughter novel, Postcards from the Edge, but film director Mike Nichols didn't find her right for the part. The role of Carrie's mother went not to Debbie, but to Shirley MacLaine. Meryl Streep was cast as Carrie. The irony of this was not lost on Debbie, who viewed it until the end of her life as a desperately wanted role denied to her by forces she could not control. In Carrie's writings, Debbie often didn't come out too well. Carrie once described her mother as, quote, a casually narcissistic gorgon ill-suited for the real world. What was her secret of perpetual youth? Carrie knew, quote, she drank bat's blood for breakfast and smeared bug brains on her skin. Reconciled after a 10-year separation, Carrie and Debbie came together at the end of their lives, clinging to each other emotionally and unable to live apart. They couldn't even die without each other, each expiring within a 2-day period in December of 2016. Their legions of fans, some of them unaware that they were related, noted their almost simultaneous deaths with loss and regret. Some of them have reported, perhaps using telepathy or the Force, that they're each doing fine, each getting along and still collaborating in a strange and awesome alternative galaxy far, far away. Thanks for taking a look at this new double biography, one that celebrates motherhood and its bonds from Blood Moon. Chances are you'll never see the likes of these two intertwined icons ever again. Debbie and Carrie, we loved you and we'll miss you both. With a salute to the differing Hollywoods in which each of you thrived, farewell, Unsinkable Tammy, and farewell, Princess Leia. As regards your evaluation of this book, as well as your evaluation of life itself, Please follow the advice of Miss Betty Davis. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Many thanks for taking a look at this book. It's great fun. Thank you for your interest, and happy Mother's Day from Blood Moon Productions.